Hey everyone, it's Ash and I'm the vegan neuropsychologist. I'm here a little bit later than usual and I'm here to talk about my addiction to self-sacrifice and why it's hurting the animals. So if this is the first time that we've met, I would like to say hello and introduce myself. I'm a neuropsychologist, which means that I'm really interested in the brain, why we do what we do, how we feel and what we think. And one of the things that I do is to help people who want to make the world a better place. And that includes vegans and vegan activists. So I support vegans and activists in any way I can by helping understand why people do think and say what they do. And that's, I guess, as one avenue in which I find myself and why I'm here sharing with you. I've also been writing a book called Staying Positive in a Fucked Up World, which I'll be talking about a little bit today, because the topic of this live stream, or if you're watching the replay, the topic of this video is on self-sacrifice. It's something I talk about in the book, and it's called the martyr syndrome. I don't know if it's an actual syndrome or if it's something that I've just come up with. But in any case, as I was writing this section of the book, I had this real epiphany because I realized that I was acting like a martyr in some areas of my life. And I think it's not just vegans or not just vegan activists who can feel this way, but people in many areas of the community. I'm thinking parents, mums in particular, but also if we're working in a company, if we're working in a big organization, it can be really easy to get caught up in the endless self-sacrifice, and it can actually become an addiction. And I do see it as being problematic, which is what I want to talk about in this video. So let's just get straight to it. So self-sacrifice is obviously a part of life, right? And I'm not saying that self-sacrifice is a bad thing. It's actually healthy to do, and it's part of any relationship. There's always give and take. So if your friend has just had a bad breakup, then maybe you are going to sacrifice a few hours of sleep so you can stay on the phone with her or sit with him or her and help support them through it. Or if you've got exams, maybe you're going to sacrifice your health a little bit. You'll be drinking a bit more coffee than normal. So self-sacrifice, I don't think, is inherently bad. The problem is when self-sacrifice is followed with no attempt at recovery or reprieve or rest. And even if it is pointed out that perhaps you need recovery or rest, then nothing's actually done about it. So I have found myself in this situation before. So I feel like I can speak about this from personal experience, but also professionally. Hey Ruth, great to see you here. Nice to have you here, especially considering it's a little bit late in the evening. So let's get straight into it. So martyr syndrome. So this is when our self-sacrifice goes to an extreme level and we're not compensating by recovering or resting or with any form of reprieve. And the reason that it's so addicting, especially in the vegan community, is because there is kind of like a badge of honor that we wear when we sacrifice ourselves. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I've certainly witnessed this and experienced it too. We start to say things like, oh, I only slept for 5 hours last night because I was so busy working on this project or planning this march or planning this next event. And thank you, Ruth. And something else that can happen is that activists, we can say to each other, I'm a better activist because I go to more activism events, or I've spent more hours doing activism, or I've converted more people to veganism. What about you? And we can actually use that as a way to feel good about ourselves. Nothing wrong with feeling good about ourselves. We have to make sure we're doing it in a healthy way. So I think the self-sacrifice can be addicting. Hey Laura, great to see you here. A bit of desperation to help. I hope I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly. A bit of desperation to help. No, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. If you can let me know, that'd be awesome. So the addiction is to, it's almost like a kind of a self-righteous superiority. So people always talk about vegans feeling superior to other people, and I guess in a way we can. Depends on how we're viewing ourselves in in relation to other people, but certainly there can be this sort of moral superiority anyway, because vegans, we live according to our values and many people in society don't. And I think amongst vegan activists, there can be this greater sense of moral superiority, which is I'm sacrificing more of myself, therefore I'm a better activist, therefore I'm doing more for the animals than you are. You get that's fine, Laura. I mean, we get desperate to make a difference. Your brain is tired. I totally get that. Yeah, and I get what you're saying. We get desperate to make a difference. It's really true. And with veganism, you know, I was having this conversation today about how, you know, we know the world's going to be vegan. It's inevitable. It's evolution, I think. But the problem is that there's a lag time, because it's not going to be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be the end of the year, or maybe by the end of the decade, or maybe longer than that. And the problem is that between now and then, there are all these animals who are going to suffer and be killed. And, you know, that's just unacceptable. Unacceptable is not a strong enough word. It's just intolerable to think of how much cruelty is yet to come because the world isn't vegan yet. And so I get there is that desperation. There's a real sense of urgency. We want the world to be vegan, and we want it yesterday, really. And so I understand where self-sacrifice can come from. And I truly believe that self-sacrifice comes from the most noble heart. We have such good intentions. And, you know, it's, I guess, a factor of our imperfect human psychology, which is that, you know, we want to help so much, but we can develop blind spots. And I think we can develop blind spots about ourselves, and we can sacrifice ourselves unknowingly, or maybe we don't realize the extent to which it's happening. So there's that healthy self-sacrifice, which is temporary, but then there's more of that sort of martyrhood kind of self-sacrifice, where we actually start to feel angry and resentful deep down inside. And we don't necessarily realize it, but it manifests in different areas of our life. So maybe our relationships suffer, maybe our job suffers, maybe our interaction with other people suffers. We find ourselves getting really hostile, getting really angry. Maybe our emotional health suffers. We're not able to regulate ourselves that well. Maybe our physical health suffers because our emotions and our physical body are linked, and so we end up getting sick more often, feeling inexplicably tired, or having other somatic symptoms like headaches and stomach aches for no real reason. So I think with the difference between sort of healthy self-sacrifice and martyrhood is where we start seeing that downstream sort of expression or symptomatic dysfunction in other areas of our life. The hard part, though, is once we recognize it, what do we do about it? And if you do recognize yourself in any of this, I just want to take a moment to commend you on it. Like I said earlier, when I was writing this section of the book, I just had this huge epiphany, and I actually said to my husband, my God, I'm actually writing about myself, because I see so much of what I'm doing is this self-righteous martyrhood. So I'm going to give you 3 reasons as to why martyrhood can be a huge problem, and I'm going to talk about the impact on ourselves, on our vegan community, and then also the wider community beyond vegans, or at least beyond activists. So the first one, pretty obvious. Everyone talks about self-care, right? And there's all those sayings like you can't give from an empty cup. And you know, you need to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And people use that analogy of being on an aeroplane, and you know, they always tell you in the safety instructions that if the oxygen mask falls, you've got to attach your own mask before you start helping other people, because you're no good to anyone if you're passed out from lack of oxygen. So we all get that. I think sometimes that's not enough incentive for us to do anything about it, because we just think, yeah, I can sacrifice a bit more sleep, I'll just drink a bit more coffee, I'll just get a few more takeaways because I don't have time to be cooking healthy meals. I think when it's just us, when we're the only ones who are suffering, it's kind of really easy to justify doing it. So that's the first impact that it has, which is on us. And generally speaking, when we're not in the best physical shape or best emotional shape, we can't be as effective activists as we'd like to be. It's like you can't run a can't run an aeroplane as effectively if you've only got 2 out of 4 engines burning. So same sort of thing. Now the second one is the impact it has on the vegan community, and this is where that self-righteousness can come in. And what can happen is, if we have people in the vegan community competing with one another on who's the better activist, who does more, who spends more hours, who has sacrificed the most, who's spent the most money, then we start to get into it's a slippery slope, and we start to get into a dangerous game of one-upmanship, where it's really the person who sacrifices the most is the one who gets the praise, or the one who gets recognized. And the only way for anyone to compete with that is to go even further. So if someone only got 4 hours sleep last night, well then I better only get 3 hours sleep, so that I get the accolades and the praise instead of the other person. So that can be a real slippery slope, and it just creates a culture of competition, where I think our culture should be one of collaboration. And competition can be very distracting. I think it takes mental effort and our mental resources away from the animals, and we're sort of focusing on things that maybe don't matter quite so much. So that's the second reason that self-sacrifice, martyrhood, can become a problem. And the third reason, and I actually think this is the most important one, and that is the impact on people just outside that group of vegan activists. So people who are vegan, or who are this close to becoming vegan, and they're sort of looking in from the outside, and they're thinking to themselves, oh, maybe I should become a vegan activist, maybe I should become more vocal about this. But then they're looking through the window and they're watching what we're doing, and they're seeing us burning out, burning ourselves to dust, working hard, not getting any sleep, not seeing our families, not taking care of our health, experiencing, unexplained tiredness and aches and pains. And then they look at that and they go, I don't want that. I don't want to be an activist. And I think it's really dangerous, because if there's one thing the vegan movement cannot afford, it is for people who are vegan to stay silent. I don't know about you, I wasn't born vegan. So it's because of activists that I am vegan today. And who knows, if it wasn't for the activists, I could still be eating animal products right now. And so we need vocal activists. We need people who are out there. And I know for some of you who are watching right now, you absolutely are activists for the vegan community. And just think, what would happen if all the vegans decided not to be activists? If people who were considering it just took a step back and said, no, I'm not going to do it. Just think about the effect that could have. Because if there's one thing we need, it is more activists. So, and this point, by the way, about vegan activism, it's just so profound. There are some vegans, they don't call themselves activists, but they still do all of the activist stuff. I'm not really worried about them, because they're just going to keep doing their thing. And obviously labels don't make that much of a difference. But it's the people who maybe they're not yet vegan, or they are vegan but they're not yet activists. Hey Shelley, it's those people that don't have the label, and for them having that label would actually make a huge difference. So if you've ever wanted to achieve a goal, let's say you've wanted to improve your health and fitness. So one thing we know about goal setting is think of it as though you're already there. So don't say I'm going to become an athlete. You say I am an athlete. Don't say I'm going to become vegan. Say I am vegan, because when you wear that label, it automatically changes your behavior. And the shift might be really subtle, but it's there. And it's kind of like that with activism. If you call yourself an activist, then your brain, it's like you flip a switch and automatically you start looking for ways that you can become more active. So you'll go to rallies, you'll go to marches, you'll get out there, you'll meet people, you'll do live streams, you'll post things on Facebook. You'll start to take on those activities without even realizing it. So labels actually make a huge difference. And if we've got people out there who are totally turned off to the idea of activism or even veganism, then it could really affect the way that our message is getting out. So I'm going to wrap up this video soon because it's late, and I really appreciate you sticking with me and watching this. There's a lot more to say about martyrhood, and I feel like I might need to live stream about this again. The more I think about it, the more and more things come to my mind. And the question is, what can we do about martyrhood? A lot of it happens, we don't even realize it, and probably there was someone around us when we were growing up who was very good at being a martyr. I don't want to stereotype here. I'm just going to say it tends to be mums. Mums are very good at sacrificing everything for their family. They even sacrifice their hopes and dreams sometimes. And so we can grow up thinking that that's what we're supposed to do. That's what a good parent does. That's what a good person does. They just sacrifice everything. Maybe we have personal heroes like Nelson Mandela, and we think, you know, he spent all those years locked up away from his family for the greater good, and how inspiring he was. And so we can start to think that that's the way to actually be an effective activist, when in actual fact it's a very small minority of people that would apply to. And for the rest of us, it's actually more important that we steer away from martyrhood, because we want to avoid the resentment and anger that can sort of cloud our activism. But also it's important for the greater good of our community, the integrity of our community, but also for those who are wanting to join the activist community. So once we recognize it in ourselves, it actually takes a little bit of vigilance to break out of some of the patterns, because the patterns that we've learned from childhood, I mean, they have been with us for years, and we don't always realize when we're doing them. So what I would suggest, Ruth, oh my God, OMG, my mum, and I've become her, but I've tempered it, I think. That's so awesome that you recognize that, Ruth. That's fantastic. I think there's a saying which is like, awareness is 90% of change, or something like that, because we can't change what we don't know. Once we do know it, we can't unknow it. You know, just like being vegan. Once you know the truth, you can't not know it. You can't go back. So knowing it is really important. And hey, Ollie, nice to see you. Hope you've recovered well from this afternoon. So with, where was I? Oh yes. So with becoming aware of some of these patterns, they happen without us realizing it. So it means we need to become vigilant. And I actually think it's useful to enlist a little bit of help if possible. So hopefully you have someone in your life, maybe a best friend or a partner, or maybe a co-worker or a fellow student, someone whom you trust and who you can maybe say to this person, look, I sometimes find myself skipping lunch, or eating my lunch at my desk, or going to bed after midnight when I really know that I need a lot more sleep than I'm getting. If you notice that I'm doing any of these things, can you please just remind me of this conversation? Because it just will help me check in on whether I'm sacrificing myself too much. So I think having someone who can maybe identify some of the patterns can be useful. If you're not in that position, that's fine. I don't think it's essential. What is necessary, gosh, I'm stumbling over my words. What is necessary is for us to become aware of our patterns. And we've all got certain things that sort of trigger us, or certain weak spots. So it might be our nutrition, or it might be our sleep. Maybe we just find ourselves going to bed later and later and not really making up for it. Maybe we know that we need to take better care of ourselves, but we're just not. Maybe we have a hard time saying no, and we just overcommit to things. And then we just have to follow through with them because we said we would. So there's a bit of introspection can be good. Sometimes just sitting down with a notebook and a pen and just letting the thoughts flow out of your brain through your hand and down onto paper can be really helpful to figure out what's happening on the inside and what might be contributing to some of the martyr behaviors. For anyone who's just joined, because I am going to be finishing up shortly, so I do encourage you to go back and watch, because the martyr syndrome, it is present in the vegan activist community, and I think it is harming our cause. So hopefully you have found this useful. If there are questions that I haven't addressed, if you could just pop them in the comment box, and I'll either get to them now as I'm talking, or maybe it'll be a topic for another live stream. A lot of what I've spoken about is actually in my book, which is, yay, it's in the editing phase, and I'm talking to my editor tomorrow and sending it overseas. So that's very exciting, and hopefully it won't be too much longer before I'll actually be able to hand a copy to you. And so I don't know how long that'll take, but hopefully it won't be too long. Hey Chris, nice to see you. So if you want to know more about the Martyr syndrome, you can definitely check out my book. Actually, what I have been doing is I've been sending out emails with little excerpts and just little bits that didn't make it into the book, but I still think are really important, or things that have occurred to me since writing the book. And now it's kind of too late for me to put it in the book, but it's still useful and relevant. I'm actually sending all of those out via email. So if you're interested in receiving, it's just news and updates and stuff, I'll put a link in the description for this video in the comments, and you can just click the link and sign up, and you'll find out all about it. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for being on this live stream. Yes, it is exciting. It's kind of like, I almost feel like I've, created a life, and I'm now giving birth to it. I don't know. If you're a parent, maybe that's an apt metaphor. Thanks, Shelley. So good to see you here. Thanks, Chris. So if there's no questions, I'm going to wrap this up really shortly. So in a nutshell, let's sum this up really quickly. In a nutshell, self-sacrifice is okay and it's healthy, but when it leads to martyrhood is when it starts to cause anger and resentment, and it starts to impact our relationships, our career, our studies, the way we interact with other people, even our emotional regulation. And if we're unwilling to do anything about it, that's when the martyr syndrome starts to appear. That can be really problematic, not only for ourselves, but also for the integrity of the vegan community, because we start to create this culture of like competition, and who's the better vegan and who's the better activist, and who spends more time on activism, and who's converted more people to veganism. One person's better than another because they're a better vegan, they're a better activist. So it just creates this competition, which is distracting away from the main issue, which is the animals. And the third reason that the martyr syndrome can be so problematic is because it actually deters people away from becoming activists. Because the hard part's already done with them. They're already vegan, or they're this close to becoming vegan. All we need for them to do now is become more outspoken about veganism. But if they're unwilling to do that, then it's a problem, because they think that activism is all about sacrificing yourself and grinding yourself into dust. And there's one thing we don't need, and that's to push existing vegans away from activism. That's one thing we don't need. So thanks so much for joining me. I hope you found this useful. Go back and watch the video from the beginning. I'll be posting this up to Facebook shortly, and I'll also post it up onto my YouTube channel. For anybody who's on YouTube, hello. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ash, the vegan neuropsychologist. Remember to click the link to sign up for book updates if you haven't already, and I will see you next Wednesday. I'm not sure what I'll be talking about yet, but I'll keep you posted. All right, have a fabulous Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon. Bye.